Rob Tabbert here for Boxing News, joined by Showtime's Brian Custer. We're here. It's getting very, very close, Brian, to Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford tomorrow night. I'm excited.
Yeah.
How about you?
I'm excited. Listen, I had to do the press conference on Thursday. I thought I was going to have to fight. I mean, when you got not only Errol and Bud sitting there looking at each other cross-eyed, wanting to get at it, all of a sudden you got the trainers. When you got the trainers ready to fight, you know it's fight week. And so, yeah, I'm ready.
It seems as though up until that point there'd been this kind of, respect between them.
Absolutely.
And there is that tension between them as two alpha males, but it seemed like Thursday it really came to the surface, didn't it?
I think now you realize there's a lot at stake. You hit it right on the nail, right on the head. You have two alpha males, and they realize one of them was on the precipice of history. And it's like, I want to take this guy out and show y'all. I think both of them have so much motivation. Errol's looking at this guy like, you guys have anointed this guy as the best pound-for-pound fighter in the world. And in his mind, he's thinking, these guys haven't even fought the type of competition I fought. And on the other side, Bud Crawford's looking at it like, you guys call this guy the big fish? I'm the best fighter right now on pound. I don't care that he's got those belts. I'm going to take this guy out. I've been undisputed before. I'm telling you, I love what's at stake for this fight.
Now, we all love a little bit of a pre-fight tension. What's it like for you when you're up there, when you've got them going back and forth? You're trying to keep them somewhat on track, but you've got to try and let it go as well a little bit for the fans. It's quite an interesting dynamic for you up there.
You got to measure that. You got to take a measure of the room. And I usually let the guys go. I mean, I'm going to let them talk their stuff. When you get the families involved, that's when I kind of like, let me kind of cut it off there, because the one thing I will say that Bud was right is sometimes that can be a recipe for disaster, because sometimes it's the entourage who take it a little bit too far. And so that's why I let him talk, but then I had to say, okay, my man, please let him finish his statement, because that can be a recipe to disaster. And the last thing you want is, these guys maybe heading to the arena or to whatever, and all of a sudden these entourages start getting into it.
Showtime, having some year, Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia was seemingly a landmark watershed moment for kind of the modern era of two young guys risking it all early in their career. We've, of course, got this. We've got Errol Spence Jr. We've got Canelo-Charlo, of course, challenging Canelo Alvarez at the end of September. Quite a good time for Showtime at the minute.
Let me tell you something. This is probably one of the best years for the sport of boxing. Because I think people forget we started the year with Plant Benavidez, two guys who hated each other for years, and we finally got them to sit down and fight one another. We get that. We get Tank and Ryan, who do $1.5 million, especially you got to think in this age of piracy and how so many people just grab links and get these fights, that we get 1.5 pay-per-view buys for that kind of fight. We got this coming up. You just talked about Charlo and Canelo fighting after this. Hey, look, you got Fulton Inoue, who just fought. This is one of the greatest years. Teofimo Haney. Boxing has got to love this. And now hopefully that we can take this year and capitalize on it and do even bigger things next year. And I think what you're realizing is now all of these guys are saying, you know what? Sure, this is about money, but this is also about legacy. And let me put my legacy on the line and be great and challenge myself. And I think that's what we're seeing now. Take that UFC model. If I lose, I lose. If it's a great fight, people are going to want to see me again and see me and you do it again anyway. And I think that's what we're seeing. You
mentioned there Stephen Fulton and Naoya Inoue. Of course, a magnificent performance from Inoue over early in the week in Tokyo. Does the winner of this fight need to do something special to claim that #1 throne, or is just the manner and the magnitude of any victory over Spence or Crawford enough to get them the #1 spot?
I think so. I think it's more the latter of what you said. I mean, listen, many believe Bud is pound-for-pound #1 guy. Errol Spence goes in there and beats him. Absolutely. I think, without question, Errol's the best. And I think Bud solidifies what people have been saying about him. If he goes in there and he can beat Errol Spence Jr., people can say what they want, whether it was the car crash or whatever. Look what he did to Ugas. I mean, Errol butchers people, and he wears them out. And if Bud Crawford can come in here and beat or stop Errol Spence, oh, my God, that, to me, the baddest man walking on the planet. And I say vice versa. Errol Spence comes in here and does to Bud Crawford what he's been doing to other welterweights. Who's better?
Now, it seems as though the entire sport of boxing, as you mentioned there, is kind of thriving. We've had a very, very good year, apart from the heavyweight division, which is seemingly letting everybody down at the minute, which is usually the one that, you know, brings in the casual fans and attracts the wider demographic. What do you make of the kind of the hoo-ha and the hold-up in the heavyweight division at the minute?
It's interesting because, listen, the old adage is when the heavyweight division is strong, so is the sport of boxing. And it's disappointing that Fury can't get Usyk, that they can't get that fight made. That now it's got to be Ngannou, it's got to be an exhibition. You know, I'm hoping that Anthony Joshua and Wilder can fight. You know, I know Wilder is trying to get Ruiz into the ring, but if we can get those guys doing what these guys are doing and just fight each other, stop with all the money's going to come. Fight each other. I think that will bring back the heavyweight division, and then I think the sport will thrive even more.
We briefly touched upon it earlier. Canelo Alvarez makes his return to Showtime after signing a 3-fight deal with PBC. Canelo-Charlo and not Jamal-Charlo in that bout. Took a lot of people by surprise in that one. One or two rumors flying around beforehand, but of course we had to wait and were surprised on the day. How big of a challenge is that for Jamal-Charlo, and also how good is it to have Canelo Alvarez back on Showtime?
It's great. It's great. It's great. I mean, Canelo for the longest was pound for pound the king, but obviously, he brings in the ratings. He has a great fan base. I think it's an interesting fight. I think Maul is still, from a personal standpoint, it's still got some problems that he's dealing with. But Mel is a guy who generally walks around 175, you know. And so for him to come up 2 weight divisions and challenge him, look, Mel has turned himself into a knockout artist under Derrick James. So I think, listen, it's going to be an interesting fight. I think there's some people who looked at Canelo and said, man, especially after the Ryder fight, like, maybe he's losing something off that fastball. And I think that's what's going to make this fight even more interesting, is that Charlo's a big puncher, and he's naturally a bigger guy. I always found it interesting how he can get that body down to 154. So I think it's going to be a really good fight. I think it's going to be an action fight, and I don't see that fight going the distance at all.
And another tall test for Coach Derrick James, who seemingly year after year gets better and better and picks up more and more accolades.
The guy is, as he likes to say, I'm a teacher, and I'm not a trainer. It's amazing. You know, Anthony Joshua, Errol Spence, Canelo-Charlo, Ryan Garcia, Frank Martin, the stable that he has. And he says that that's it. He's only going to deal with those 5 because he said right now that's a lot for him. But I'm more interested to see if he can get Anthony Joshua back to being back that old Anthony Joshua, the Klitschko Anthony Joshua. And get Ryan Garcia, get his confidence back after suffering that loss there to Tank Davis.
Just staying with Canelo Alvarez, of course, you know, Jamal-Charlo will have his own ideas about what happens after September, but Canelo has signed a 3-fight deal with PBC. We've got David Benavidez, we've got David Morrell, Errol Spence is a name that's trying to be thrown into the hat there.
Yes.
Which one of those fights do you think is the most appealing for the fan? Which one? It seems as though, from my very removed position, that people really want to see Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez.
I think, let me tell you something. I think a lot of people want to see that fight. I think I want to see it next. I think that would be good. But I do believe that they see, and this is just from my opinion, I do believe that they see a Canelo Alvarez Errol Spence fight, especially if he wins. He wins Saturday. Can you imagine, let's say, a Errol Spence Canelo Alvarez fight in Texas, Cowboy Stadium? He put 40,000 against Ugas. You know Canelo will bring 50,000 by him. That'd be like 90,000 people in that stadium. That would be bonkers. So I think that's a fight they see down the road, without question. One of those 3 fights for Canelo.
You mentioned there about Anthony Joshua, of course, from our neck of the woods across the pond. You mentioned there about kind of him getting back to his old ways and being more of that destructive Anthony Joshua that we saw in the early stages of his career. How much, in your opinion, is that due to mindset? How much is it due to what can be worked on in the gym?
I think it's mostly mindset. It's mostly confidence. And I think if you talk with Derrick, and I'm sure you have, you know, one of the things he wants to do is make him more fundamentally sound. He just felt like early on in Anthony's career, he had the athleticism and was just beating guys on athleticism alone and didn't really understand why and how he was beating guys. He was just doing it off of okay, I do this, boom, I knocked this guy out. Now Derrick is trying to get him to be a thinker, get him to say, hey, why'd you throw that shot? Why didn't you set it up with this? And now he's trying to get him to get his way of fighting. And I think you're going to see a better Anthony Joshua, but it's up here first. And I think that's what Derrick's working on.
Here You mentioned earlier as well, Gervonta Davis and Ryan Garcia, fresh off the back of that, record. Well, it's certainly a modern record of the last few years. I think it's the first fight since Canelo Triple G to do 1 million buys over here in the United States. Both kind of emerged with, obviously, Gervonta Davis' reputation enhanced. Ryan Garcia, I don't think it did him any damage, that fight with Gervonta Davis. Where would you like to see both of them go next?
Well, I think for Tank, now that Tank is home and out of his legal stuff, I think one of the things he's going to be watching is the Isaac Cruz fight. And I think it's because he wants to fight again before the end of the year. And I think he wants a fight that will be appealing to the fans and one that will set up to a major fight for the beginning of next year. And I think if Isaac Cruz wins this weekend and does what he's been doing lately, and let's say blows away his opponent, now all of a sudden he can say, hey, look, I'm one of the only few guys who went all 12 with you, and let's get it on for a rematch. And I think that's the thing. And I think Rolly Romero is the guy who I think Ryan Garcia wants to fight next. They know they can talk a lot of stuff. And love him or hate him, people watch Rolly Romero. People watch Ryan Garcia, and it will be quite an entertaining fight.
Yeah, I mean, all of those years ago, the classic spar in the gym and all of the videos,
exactly.
it starts a long, long time ago, so there is a backstory. Right, Brian, I do appreciate your time in a very, very busy fight week. I don't know whether or not I can push you for a prediction, but if not, tell fans right into that camera what to expect tomorrow night, Errol Spence Jr. versus Terence Crawford.
I think you're going to see an athletic Terence Crawford, a guy who has tried to use some movement with Errol Spence. Errol Spence is going to be who he is. He's going to come forward and try to apply pressure mentally and physically. I think it's going to be the first couple of rounds, maybe feel out, see what they got. But trust me, round 3, it's going to percolate, and it will be a fight that will not go the distance.
There you have it. Brian Custer there of Showtime. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing News. And we look forward.
I love the way y'all love the sport. I wish we here love the sport the way y'all treat the sport there.
Well, you're welcome in the UK anytime.
I love it.
Thanks very much.
Absolutely.